We're back. All right. 6 gigs later, I feel like we have enough room to finish this. All right. There was Da Vinci. Let's talk about Raphael. School of Athens. We've looked at this piece like 20 times already. It's my go-to for perfect composition. Every single art toolkit element that we studied is executed here perfectly. Um, in the center, you see we've got Plato versus Aristotle, human knowledge. We've got perfect single vanishing point perspective. We've talked about that. We've talked about the complementary colors that sort of signal the narrative. We've talked about how it's balanced. Point of view, we enter comfortably. We've got a foreground. We've got our main event. We got our background vanishing into open blue sky. We've got a huge crowd of people, but it certainly doesn't feel crowded. We've got the past greats here of Athens, and we're invited to take part in the genius of their time. So the School of Athens here gives credit to the ancients for the human knowledge. But it's also about the artists of the High Renaissance recognizing the greatness of the past. All the big four, Michelangelo, Raphael, Bramante, and Da Vinci, are written into the classical world here. So we've got okay, so slump forward here. We've got Heraclitus. That is actually a portrait of Michelangelo. Um, so we've also got the big guy here, Plato, the grandfather of them all. That's a portrait of Leonardo da Vinci. If you're familiar with those self-portraits of Leonardo da Vinci that we have from the past, quite famous, it looks like him, doesn't it? So he's added, by the way, this Heraclitus to the painting later as a later addition. It's not in the initial sketches. These two knew each other quite well, Michelangelo and Raphael. So meanwhile, while Raphael was painting this in the library at the Vatican, Michelangelo was painting the Sistine Chapel. So I don't know if it's like Roadrunner and Wile E. Coyote stamping in every day for work, but they would have been working in the same place, getting the sort of same, like, who's oohing and awing over whose work as they're going. They'd have run into each other. I'm not going to say like at the water cooler or the break room, but you know what I mean. They were both working. They were both artists within the same building complex at the Vatican at the exact same time. They'd have known each other. They'd have been rivals, but maybe not like aggressively in a bad way. They'd have been in competition, but also maybe learning to respect each other as well. So after working with him in St. Peter's, Michelangelo was added to this piece as sort of an homage to him. So let's look at Plato. He is the great teacher of Aristotle. He is also the granddaddy of the High Renaissance. So here he is with the face of Leonardo da Vinci. Over here, Raphael, once again, just giving himself the little peeking out of the corner self-portrait that we've seen in so many other works in that lead up to the High Renaissance. So he put himself at the edge of the fresco as a character looking out at us, making that eye contact. Here we've got Michelangelo, late edition, but I think probably is a really good example of Michelangelo as a person too. Like, he seems like kind of a grump who's not paying attention to anybody, even though he's in a rather social situation. As we see how Michelangelo does himself in self-portraits as we go along over the next couple weeks, you'll say like accurate. He seems like he was kind of a killjoy. All right, so back to the School of Athens as a whole. This represents the perfection of human knowledge. This is in the Pope's library. So I think it's a fitting place for this fresco, being sort of the representation of the greatest of human knowledge. On the other side, so you can see here, it's like a barrel vault ceiling, where we've kind of got that like half a cylinder going on here in our rounded archway. So down the other end of the barrel vault, you're going to have a facing painting, and that is Raphael's same year, Disputation of the Divine Sacrament. So we've got human knowledge and the nods towards what we have achieved as the human race on one end of the library, and then we have our divine knowledge represented on the other end of the room. So, two levels of existence. You can see that we've got sort of double vanishing point perspective going on here. Look at how many people. Just count the crowd here and how much we got going on. And again, Raphael, master of making a busy scene actually look quite clean and well organized. So you've got the vanishing point perspective here. You could follow the orthogonals with a ruler to see that our vanishing point is sort of right here behind the altar with the Holy Sacrament. And then you can see we've got that vanishing point perspective happening above us as well. And that secondary vanishing point is right above the first. Here we also have some work towards a vanishing point on a third tier that we are coming to. So we've got the altar with the Holy Sacrament being our earthly vanishing point. The clouds are foreshortened as a floor that we're looking underneath, and the clouds are also little cherub babies. So all of these are figures with faces and expressions, and there's so many human figures here. If you look up here in these clouds are also cherub figures. So many human figures here. This should be such a busy, crowded, difficult to get your eye through composition if it weren't Raphael. But everything is so neatly balanced and organized that it's quite easy to read. Doesn't feel cramped at all. Everybody's having quite a nice time. It's just this incredibly complex composition that he makes it look easy. And that is why you're going to start to sort of recognize Raphael in many of our later artists when they're stuck with a crowd that they've got to depict. They look to him for organization. And sometimes there'll be an homage to it, and other times it will be sort of a screw you, Raphael kind of moment where you kind of recognize where they took exactly his composition and then twisted it a little bit. So you can tell that they studied him. Whether or not they're happy about it or not is something else to be seen. Also, look at these cherubs holding on to the rays of light as well. So many figures in this composition. It boggles the mind. But it's clean, it's balanced, it's organized, it's easy to read because Raphael is great. Right, so master of composition. Busy, should look chaotic, cramped, uncomfortable, but it is clean and easy breezy. All right, Michelangelo. Sorry about my pointer there. Pietà. We've got this master of figure. What we have here is also quite a complicated composition if you think about it from a logistical perspective. So you've got a full-sized female figure and male figure. One is clothed, one is nude. One is alive, one is dead. That's a lot to pack into a sculpture. So he's gone for a triangular composition. It's again with Mary being the apex, and then we come down that her seat on the rocks here and the folds of her cloth actually make up the base of the sculpture. So she creates this wide base with her robes. And remember, this is made of stone, so it's got to be bottom heavy, so not to be tippy. He's accomplished that logistically, but also made it quite beautiful of form in that triangular composition as well. Remember that marble is a subtractive medium, which means you chip into it, and if you go too far, there is no patching it back. So thinking about how complicated this is, and having to sort of only chip away, never adding, just really adds to the incredible. It's just awesome. So oval face. Once again, we've got our Italian high Renaissance ideal. We've got this oval face with the sort of thin chin. We've got the high cheekbones. We've got these sort of hooded, thick upper lids. Even though she's looking down, you can see her lower lid as well. We've still got that sort of bump of like a nice, soft, heavy upper lid. We've got a long, slim nose. We got thin lips. Everything about an ideal Renaissance beauty. But the level of detail in this piece is just staggering for a marble statue. Let's have a look at the hand of Christ here. Jesus, you've got the veins running under his skin. You've got the hole from the nail as he's been pulled off the cross, crucified. You've got the little ridges in his fingers. The cuticle on his fingernail is actually like a secondary ridge. These are so incredibly well detailed. And to create that difference in those contrasts, to put a full-size adult male nude corpse on top of a clothed female figure who's very much alive, in the same stone, in the same composition. He's managed it. I mean, this is an incredible piece for its contrasts, and that's part of what makes it so striking. Let's look at another one of his great pieces that everybody sort of recognizes. Michelangelo's David. That'd be him over there on the left. I've thrown one of our key terms up here, contrapposto. Contrapposto is, again, that way that you stand with all of your weight on one leg. So you got the hip kind of popped out here because you've got all your weight on one leg. That's called standing contrapposto, where you can sort of almost like point this toe because there's no, like, you know, he could start doing a dance move here because that left leg is just free and ready to rock. I think also, let's take a moment of, David is 14 feet high. He is twice as tall as a normal, I mean, 7 foot tall is not a normal man. He's real big. I've got this great image from conservation here where you can see this woman on a scaffold. Like, that's how big this sculpture is. So, the amount of upscaling that had to happen while this stayed anatomically and figuratively accurate is incredible. So I think this is a great image. I think I might slap it up in your Blackboard folder just for fun, to remember just how huge this piece is. All right, so he studied anatomy. He also studied classical sculpture. I have the Apollo Belvedere over here on the right. It is not huge. It's like people-sized. It's life-sized. But you can notice that this piece, the Apollo Belvedere, is a Roman marble sculpture. It's from the 2nd century, and it's a copy of a 4th century BC Greek sculpture. So this thing is like a copy of a 600-year-old statue when it was made, and then Michelangelo gets inspired and uses it, you know, more than 1,000 years later. It's quite interesting that that one sculpture is so influential over the years and over the civilizations. So the Apollo Belvedere here, you can see contrapposto position. That arm would have been resting down by his hip like Michelangelo does. He's got the other arm out. Obviously here we've got it bent, but we've very much got a very similar overall figure here. The Apollo Belvedere is an important piece because it was discovered during this time. So archaeology, not a new thing, question mark. I think this is just a great piece to sort of represent that 7.5 heads high proportioning. You've got this great, people talk about how the arms are too long and the hands are too big and the feet are too big. And then the counter argument is David was supposed to be a youth. And one thing about teenagers or pubescent youths is their arms and hands and feet are too big because they grow faster than the rest of your torso height. So he's probably perfectly proportioned for being like a mid to late teen. Whether or not you can get like the muscle definition of a 30-year-old is a different question. But I think you can see here, certainly with the figurative forms, some of his inspiration, yet some of it is very much specifically high Renaissance. Let's have a look at some more of Michelangelo's male figures. We've got the creation of Adam here in the Sistine Chapel ceiling. Like, meanwhile, so this is 1511. Raphael was doing the library in 1510. They'd have been hanging out together. So we've got creation of Adam. Neoplatonic thought is a way that classicism started to become Catholicified during this time. So Plato, you saw him in the School of Athens with Raphael, kind of getting mixed. Plato's theories from the ancient Greek are starting to get mixed with Christian theology added to sort of update it. So this idea that human beings have a spark of divinity in them, this is a great piece that kind of represents Neoplatonic thought, that you've got Adam in the Sistine ceiling. Adam's just a lump of stupid dead clay until God, on the right here with that energy, comes in and touches him, literally, with his finger there, with a spark of the divine. So each of us has a little bit of God in us. All of us are a little bit divine. You can see from the first half of this term that if you were to say that we're all a little bit like God, that had probably gotten you burned at the stake a few hundred years earlier. That would not have been cool with the Gothics, right? Keep yourself down in that mud. So fear God, be afraid of him, and judgment was more where we were. And now kind of elevating man to be divine, or at least having a spark of divinity in us, that we've all got that spark of God, which makes us special and creative and godlike and magical in our abilities to reach new heights. It makes us different from every other creature on earth. That's this Neoplatonic thought. This is like Plato's idea about all of us being godlike, or that the gods are modeled after us rather than vice versa, getting updated into that Christian theology. So each of us having that spark of divinity in our creation. So yeah, I think that should be a good set of solid pieces. We have critiqued this piece many times. You can see the color with the cool versus warm. We've got the simple figure versus very complex composition of figure here. We've got the static versus the movement. We got a lot going on here that we've already discussed ad nauseum. So I am going to cut it there. This is just sort of our intro into the High Renaissance and sort of our big three. More on them soon, but thanks for watching, guys, and I'll see you next week.